Hello, my name's James Moore. I'm the Chief Business Commentator of The Independent. We open the floor to questions from you about the cost of living crisis, about payments, benefits, and a little bit on disability, which I happen to be something of an expert on for obvious reasons. So over to your questions. Martin starts us off. It's not even taxpayers' money, it's borrowed taxpayers' money that will be added to the 2.5 trillion already borrowed. Count the number of Tories that will get a seat on the board of the energy companies in the not too distant future. So yes, why are we borrowing this phenomenal sum of money to subsidise everyone's energy bills when the energy companies are literally coining it in? Well, you have to look at the energy market a bit. There are two different types of companies here. There is the company which supplies you and me. That would be like your OVO Energy or your Octopus. And there are also the companies which generate the energy, and that would be a Shell or a BP. The suppliers buy the energy on the wholesale market, and the wholesale market prices have boomed. And the problem here is that Britain is kind of uniquely reliant on wholesale prices because successive governments said, you know what, the market will see us right. It'll sort everything out. We can just rely on the market and it'll fix everything. And of course, now we see in a period of market dislocation and disruption that isn't a terribly clever way to go. So that's why, in a sense, the government are making so much, doing so much borrowing to subsidise our bills. And people will say, well, why aren't they doing a windfall tax? Well, they are, but you can't just windfall tax Shell on all its operations, though I think there are people who would like to and think perhaps we should find a way of doing that. But yeah, that hopefully gives you some idea of why we're borrowing so much. And the one thing that we really ought to be doing as a country is prioritising energy security and ensuring we make enough of our own energy so we don't have to be a big net importer of other people's fuel, because you'll find that fossil fuel in particular tends to be made or tends to be dug up in places with fairly unsavoury regimes which aren't always very friendly, and Mr. Putin's Russia would be the obvious example here. Simon says, why are most of the deals with the cost of living aimed at people on means-tested benefits? He works full-time, gets no help with anything like a lot of people, and is sure the majority are worse off to contributing to society. Just point of view. Well, Simon, the thing is, if you look at the energy price support scheme in particular, it isn't actually the poorest people in society who are benefiting the most. It might look that way because there are the warm homes discount, for example, but actually the way the government did it is to say to everyone, right, we're going to cut everyone's bills. So the energy price support scheme they've done means that the biggest beneficiary are people in mansions, because mansions use the most energy. So that's where actually most of the money going. And if you look at the reaction of a right-wing think tank, that would be the Institute of Economic Affairs. One might remember they were quite pally with Liz Truss when she was Premier for a very short and disastrous times. The Institute of Economic Affairs looked at the energy support scheme that was initially formulated by her and called it middle-class welfare, which is what it is. I understand that people working and struggling think they're getting the thick end of the wedge, but they're not, really. People on benefits are very, very close to the breadline. It's very hard at the moment if you're getting, 3/5 of nothing, and you're not having enough to feed your family. But I think, really what we want to do is make sure people who can afford to pay the most are helping everybody out a little bit more, and you can make a strong case that they're not doing that enough at the moment. Martin asks, why is it taking so long to get a child fully assessed for autism? This one's quite close to home for me because one of my kids is autistic, and it took us a long time to get an assessment. And I think the problem is mental health and developmental conditions such as autism tends to be classified under this because that's where the help is needed. Is very much the poor relation in the NHS. It's been starved of funding. I would argue it hasn't always been terrible. What funding there has been hasn't always been well managed. We've been through a process of endless assessments. There's one assessment, there's another assessment, and then you have to wait 6 months, and then you have to get another assessment. And this is after we managed to get the diagnosis, which took us a long wait. So the reason it does take so very long is because mental health services is just the poor relation. It's been forgotten about, starved of funding, and it is frankly scandalous. It appalls me, it infuriates me, and I've got every sympathy with you if you're in the position that we were in, waiting to get an assessment. And I hate to say this, but once you've got the assessment, it doesn't necessarily get any better. And we have another disability-related question, and that is, why are disabled people some of the poorest in the land? We didn't choose to be disabled, stuff happens, and anyone could, through no fault of their own, end up wholly reliant on benefits such as ESA and PIP. It is a good question. The government has made a great big deal about recently deciding we're going to get disabled people back into work. We're going to focus on what they can do, not what they can't do. And cynics would look at that, which has resulted in the abandonment of what was known as the workplace capability assessment, which basically said whether you could do work and how much you could do, which was very humiliating to people. They had to go through a sort of quasi-legal process, pretty horrible, having assessed on just how disabled you are and having to prove you're disabled. They got rid of that, but the problem is they've put incapacity benefit onto PIP, which wasn't designed to address workplace issues. It was designed to address the cost of living, extra cost of living disabled people face. And it looks like a cynical attempt to cut the benefits bill again. And it's cynical tinkering like that which impoverishes disabled people. The other thing they haven't done is really work at all hard at pushing employers to do disability a bit better. And the government oversees some of the biggest employers in the land. It oversees the biggest employer in the land, which is the NHS. And if you said, we want everyone to have a disabled candidate on the shortlist, just make sure they're on the shortlist so they get an interview, I think it would go some way towards improving the situation, but they will never do that. They never take that step. So the reason disabled people are some of the poorest in society is because we've allowed it to get that way, and we've allowed discrimination, which is really widespread, to flourish. It's not been a fashionable cause, and yeah, I think it needs to be addressed. I shout about it in my columns a lot, and I'm going to continue doing so. And we have Samantha, who asks, she's got the warm homes discount, and she's had it for quite a few years, but having been told that we don't need to apply for this year, it's automatically put on the smart meter. She hasn't received it. Can you tell me if I was misinformed or haven't the payments gone out yet? What I would say to Samantha is not having seen your energy bill, I can't answer that directly. So my advice would be, call your energy company. Call your energy supplier and ask, because it's they who administer the warm home discount, and they should be taking it off. And so just say to them, am I getting this? Have you taken it off the bill? And if not, how can I get it? They should help you with that. If they don't help you with that, put in a formal complaint. If they don't answer the formal complaint, contact the Energy Ombudsman. It's free. It will involve a little chasing around and harassing people, if you like. Harassing, probably a bad word, but pestering people to make sure you get heard. But you should do that, because obviously you should be getting the discount. Your energy company should be dealing with it, and if they're not, they should sort it out. They're not very good at customer service, but push them. I urge everyone to do that. Complain. We don't do that enough as a nation. We let people get away with treating us badly. There are means you can use to complain. There are ombudsman services. You complain to the organisation first, then kick it to the ombudsman, and you do that for free. It's them who pays. So I urge you to contact them, and if you don't get an answer you like, and if you don't get the answer you expect, complain. So, I mean, one of the problems with energy price support generally is, while we have the energy price guarantee, which puts bills at 2,500, that's an average, remember. Your bill will actually depend on your usage, but that is the average. There was also a £400 payment separately over winter. There is the warm homes discount. There are There is a separate scheme for pensioners. There's one for disabled people, which pays a little less. There are, a myriad of fractured schemes. They're administered by different people in different ways. They're paid to people by different people in different ways. People on meters, and I don't mean smart meters, I mean prepayment meters, which are usually the worst situation. It's been a big scandal about the number of people who've had these forcibly imposed on them. Get a voucher. Well, a lot of those vouchers have gone unclaimed. And, part of the problem with all of this is just how fractured and complicated it gets. So you have my sympathies, you really do, because this is not an easy situation to navigate, and finding support with that is not easy. One possible outlet would be your local Citizens Advice Bureau, who may be able to help. I know also that some food banks, there was one I went to a couple of years ago to do an article on, had a welfare expert in there who made it his life's work to handle the bureaucracy, and he was really good at it. So yeah, I would urge people, if they are getting static, there are resources you call upon, and I would urge people to use them. Thanks for all your questions. You can keep up to date with the latest news at The Independent. Follow me on Twitter @JimOrJourno, where I'll post my columns, and keep watching Independent TV for more of these sessions. I'll be back soon. Thanks very much.